Judging someone who comes from a family of wealth is no different than judging someone who comes from a family of poverty. This was something I realized before I graduated college. It is almost socially acceptable if you're talking about someone or making assumptions. More often than not, these prejudices turn into insults, when someone has parents who are wealthy vs someone who doesn't come from wealth. It is almost as if people punish students and kids for having wealthy parents, and I think that is just not fair. How do you know that the parents were born into wealth or born into poverty? How do you know whether the parents worked their asses off to have the privileges they have? The prejudice of judging someone immediately because of their socioeconomic status vs whether the individual is actually a good person keeps getting overlooked, and I've met many assholes who have come from low-income households vs many great and genuine people whom were middle class and above. Edit *, thank you for the awards. I've been reading the comments and glad everyone has been civil, and I've really been enjoying the different opinions and viewpoints on this subject. It's generally considered more shitty to punch down. I think the big difference isn't rich vs poor, it's spoiled vs gratuitous. As long as they aren't spoiled fuckers who can't live without 5 cards, they're fine. Dehumanizing people and morally justifying doing so is one of the top ways for people to rationalize taking away from others what they themselves do not have. Isn't that kind of the point? To become wealthy enough to provide for your children so they don't have to grow up in the same situation as you. How do you know whether the parents worked their asses off to have the privileges they have? They're not judging your parents. They're judging you. You didn't work your ass off, your parents did. You didn't earn the privileges wealth provides, your parents did. Making an equivalence in the experiences of being judged for being rich and poor, is the reason rich people are judged for being rich. Every person in the world would rather be rich than poor, but we've all run into enough entitled rich people that think they've had just as hard of a life as everyone else that it makes it easy to judge. To the point of the top comment, assholes can be both poor and rich. Sure, I agree, but people typically aren't assholes because they're poor. On the other hand, I know plenty of people that are assholes because of how much money their parents give them in their monthly allowance. I wonder if this is a new phenomenon because when I was in college I can't ever remember ever hearing insults / having a discussion about whether someone came from money or not. I had friends who were shocked when they came to my parents' house. My parents are literally what you described above. Both grew up in extreme poverty and worked their asses off to become reasonably well off, but it was never a thing. My parents certainly weren't giving me any of their money and are extremely conscious about spending, so I lived paycheck to paycheck in college. That's just to say because someone's parents have money doesn't mean they do. I think this is unpopular, so upvoted, but I also disagree. The difference is having poor parents is inherently a disadvantage compared to wealthy ones. I think any reasonable person will judge anyone first and foremost by the content of their character, but beyond that I don't think it's unfair to scrutinize one's behavior, accomplishments, etc. More when coming from a rich background vs poor, as there is generally way more support and guidance for the former than latter. I grew up in a quite financially secure household with mom and dad both having 6-figure salaries. While I obviously had everything I needed without question, I was by no means spoiled. I had to buy my own clothes and own video games etc. that I wanted. In university, one of my roommates came from a very small farm town where only her mother worked as a waitress for a total of about $25,000 a year to support the whole family. Very poor. I remember in my first year of university, I had a part-time job while in school, plus I would do little side gigs for extra cash. One day, one of my roommates asked me why I bother doing the little side gigs since they only pay about $10 an hour, less than the minimum wage where I live, and they were very rare to find. I told her that I needed to pay off my credit card bill and that I ended up doing 3 side gigs this month for a total of $30, which basically covered my entire credit card bill of $33 that month. She looked at me and said, "Oh, don't your parents pay off your credit card bill?" I don't know why it enraged me as much as it did, but I was really upset by this comment. She knows that I work part-time during school, which she didn't, and had the audacity to insinuate that my parents just support my lifestyle. My parents don't just pay for anything I put on my credit card even if they could afford to. If I want to buy something then I have to work for it, and it's been that way my whole life. To this day I usually have 2 or 3 part-time jobs during the school year to save money and have a bit to spend. I hated the insinuation that I was some spoiled rich kid. My family isn't even rich, we are upper middle class, who didn't have to work. They want you to be self-aware of your advantages and privileges, the ways your life has been easier than the poor. They want you to take the time to appreciate how your life is better, which frankly few born into privilege do. As long as you do those things, and retain your empathy for other people, no one has just cause to resent you. I think it's also aggravated by just how increasingly unequal times are becoming. I know a lot of Americans who are working very, very hard and going nowhere. They are still underemployed, uninsured, and living paycheck to paycheck. The corona flu overwhelmingly hurt the working class more than professionals. And those people can't help but resent what they see as a callous and out-of-touch top 15% who are seeing good times, but seemingly doing nothing to make life better for all. I haven't read how people feel about whether this is an unpopular or popular opinion, but I can say for a fact in my circles this is an unpopular opinion. It's ridiculous, because I know people who will bash their own friends for having wealthy parents or family, even if they know their backstory, immigrants who moved and had nothing for years before they had money. You're right. Just because someone is wealthy, doesn't mean they're a bad person. The problem isn't with the wealthy. The problem is with the political and socio-economic systems which the majority of the wealthy support, that actively works against the best interests of the poor for the sake of their own wealth and power. And why wouldn't they support those systems? After all, it benefits them and they don't have to see the damage it causes to everyday people. They get to the point where they feel entitled to accumulate more wealth without understanding the real-life toll of their actions. It's ignorance manifested as malevolence for many. There is a reason why middle-class and lower-class people want progressive policies. The wealth gap in America is as bad if not worse than it was just before the Great Depression. The rich are literally getting richer while the poor get poorer. There is a class war going on in America, and it was started by the rich and those who represent them. So I think it's excusable to be a little distrusting and disgusted with those who have obscene wealth, especially those who use their money to push political policies that will make them wealthier.